Welcome to the story of America. Hello, my friends. Today, we begin a fascinating journey through the history of the United States of America, right here on the PowerHab English channel. If you're ready to learn and improve your English while exploring one of the most powerful countries in the world, you're in the right place. This lesson is designed for both listening and speaking practice, and I promise to make it easy, fun, and interesting. By the end of this series, you will not only understand America's history, but you'll also be able to discuss its discovery struggles, people, and why it stands as a global leader today. Ready? Let's dive in. How did it all begin? So here's the big question: who discovered America? A long time ago, around 15,000 years ago, Native American tribes lived on this land. They were the first people to call America home. These tribes were hunters and gatherers traveling across a land bridge from Asia to North America. They lived in harmony with nature, growing crops, hunting animals, and building unique cultures. But the story of America as we know it starts much later in 1492. An Italian explorer, Christopher Columbus, set sail. He was looking for a new route to Asia, but instead, he landed in the Americas. This journey was funded by the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. Columbus thought he had reached India, so he called the native people Indians. However, Columbus wasn't the first European to reach America. Nearly 500 years earlier, the Vikings led by Leif Erikson landed in what is now Canada. But their settlements didn't last long, so Columbus is often credited with discovering America because his journey brought European attention to the continent. The European rush after Columbus. More explorers came from Europe. Spain, France, England, and other countries sent ships to claim land in the New World. Spain focused on South and Central America, where they found gold and silver. England and France started building colonies in North America. These European settlers brought many changes to the land and its people. They introduced new foods, animals, and technology, but they also brought diseases which sadly killed many Native Americans. This was the beginning of a very complex and painful relationship between the settlers and the native people. The first colonies. In 1607, England established its first permanent colony in America, called Jamestown in Virginia. This was the start of a long process of European colonization that would shape the history of America for centuries to come. The settlers faced many challenges: harsh winters, disease, and a lack of food. But despite these hardships, they managed to survive. Soon more colonies were established, and people from Europe began moving to America in search of a better life. One of the most famous groups was the Pilgrims, who arrived in America in 1620 on a ship called the Mayflower. They were escaping religious persecution in England and sought the freedom to worship as they wished. They landed in what is now Massachusetts and celebrated the first Thanksgiving with the Native Americans who helped them survive. Why was America so important? By the 1700s, America became a land of opportunity. People came from all over Europe believing they could find freedom land and a new life here. But this new beginning wasn't easy. Different countries were fighting for control of America, especially England, France, and Spain. By the 1700s, there were 13 colonies along the east coast of what is now the United States. These colonies were divided into three main regions. 1. New England colonies, like Massachusetts and Connecticut. These colonies were known for their forests, fishing, and small farms. People here often worked together as communities. 2. Middle colonies like New York and Pennsylvania. These colonies were known as the breadbasket because they grew lots of wheat and grain. There were also many different cultures and religions in these colonies. 3. Southern colonies like Virginia and Georgia. These colonies had large farms called plantations, where crops like tobacco, rice, and cotton were grown. Much of the hard work on these plantations was done by enslaved Africans, a tragic and cruel part of America's history. Life in the colonies. Life in the colonies wasn't easy. People had to build homes, grow their own food, and survive harsh winters. Families worked hard, and children often helped their parents on the farm. Schools were rare, and only a few children learned to read or write. But despite these challenges, the colonies were full of hope. People came here because they wanted religious freedom land and opportunities they didn't have in Europe. Some colonies, like Pennsylvania, were even founded as safe places for people of all religions. Conflict with Britain. Even though the colonies were in America, they were still ruled by Britain. The King of England, King George III, made the laws for the colonies, and the colonists had to pay high taxes to Britain. The colonists started to feel angry because they didn't have any say in the British government, so they began to demand no taxation without representation. This meant they didn't want to pay taxes unless they could have a voice in making the laws. One famous example of this anger was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Colonists dressed up like Native Americans snuck onto British ships and threw boxes of tea into the water as a protest against a tax on tea. The road to independence. By the mid-1700s, the colonists were tired of being controlled by Britain. They wanted the freedom to make their own laws and decisions. In 1775, a war began between the colonies and Britain. This was called the American Revolution. The colonists were led by brave leaders like George Washington, who became the commander of the American Army. Another important figure was Thomas Jefferson, who wrote a very famous document called the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence. This document, written on July 4, 1776, declared that the colonies were no longer part of Britain. It stated that all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was a bold move because it meant the colonies were now at full war with one of the most powerful countries in the world at that time, Britain. The American Revolution. The war was tough. The British Army was big, well-trained, and had plenty of weapons. The American colonists were farmers, shopkeepers, and regular people with little military training. But they had something important, a strong belief in freedom. They also received help from France, which provided soldiers weapons and ships. After years of fighting, the Americans finally won an important battle in Yorktown, Virginia, in 1781. 2 years later, in 1783, Britain officially recognized the United States of America as an independent country. The United States is born after the war. The leaders of the new country wrote the Constitution, which is a set of rules for how the country should work. They also elected George Washington as the first president of the United States in 1789. This marked the beginning of a new country, built on the ideas of freedom, equality, and democracy. However, these ideas didn't apply to everyone at the time. Enslaved people, women, and Native Americans were not treated equally, and it would take many years of struggle to make progress toward true equality. Expansion of the United States. Now that the United States of America was born, it was time to grow. But this growth wasn't simple. It involved new opportunities, difficult challenges, and a dark chapter in American history: slavery. The Louisiana Purchase and westward expansion. After the War of Independence, the United States was still small. It consisted of just 13 states along the East Coast, but Americans had big dreams. They wanted to expand westward and explore the vast lands of North America. In 1803, something extraordinary happened. President Thomas Jefferson bought a huge piece of land from France. This was called the Louisiana Purchase, and it doubled the size of the United States. This land stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains and opened up endless opportunities for farming, trade, and exploration. To learn more about this new land, Jefferson sent two explorers, Lewis and Clark, on a journey to map and explore the vast territories now under American control. The push westward. With the help of a Native American woman named Sacagawea Lewis and Clark, traveled across rivers, mountains, and plains, mapping the land and meeting Native American tribes along the way. Their expedition opened up vast opportunities for expansion. The idea of moving west became known as manifest destiny. Many Americans believed it was their destiny or fate to spread across the entire continent from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Families packed their belongings and traveled in covered wagons to find new homes in the West. They faced many dangers, including harsh weather, wild animals, and difficult terrain. Despite the challenges, westward expansion symbolized a new opportunity for growth and prosperity. However, this expansion wasn't fair to everyone. Native American tribes were forced off their lands and pushed onto reservations. This led to many conflicts and a deep sense of loss for the native peoples whose way of life was forever changed. The rise of slavery. As America grew, so did its economy. The southern states became wealthy because of large plantations that grew crops like cotton and tobacco. But this wealth came at a terrible cost. The plantation owners used enslaved Africans to do the hard labor. These enslaved people were kidnapped from their homes in Africa and brought to America under horrifying conditions. Slavery was a brutal system. Enslaved people were treated as property, not as human beings. They worked long hours in the fields, often under the scorching sun, and lived in terrible conditions. Families were torn apart, and enslaved people had no rights or freedom. A divided nation. By the mid-1800s, America was divided into two regions with very different views on slavery. The North, most people in the North believed slavery was wrong. They wanted to end it and give everyone a chance to live freely. Many Northerners worked in factories or owned small farms so they didn't rely on enslaved labor. The South. The Southern economy depended on slavery. Plantation owners argued that their wealth and success would collapse without enslaved workers. This disagreement grew stronger and stronger, and people in the North and South started to feel like they were living in two completely different countries. Fighting against slavery. Many brave individuals fought against slavery. Some of the most famous were the abolitionists, people who worked to end slavery in America. One of the most inspiring figures was Harriet Tubman, an escaped slave who became a leader in the Underground Railroad. This wasn't a real railroad, but a secret network of people and places that helped enslaved people escape to freedom in the North. Another important figure was Frederick Douglass, a former slave who became a powerful writer and speaker. He shared his story with the world and showed the horrors of slavery through his words. Books also played a big role in the fight against slavery. A woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which showed how cruel slavery was. This book made many people in the North realize they had to take action. The road to war. By the 1860s, the tension between the North and South reached a breaking point. The Southern states wanted to keep slavery, while the Northern states wanted to stop it. In 1861, the Southern states decided to leave the United States and form their own country called the Confederacy. This marked the beginning of a terrible conflict known as the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't just about slavery. It was also about whether the United States should stay united as one country or split into two. This war would change the course of America's history, forever shaping the nation's future. Slavery at the heart of the conflict. However, slavery was at the heart of the conflict. President Abraham Lincoln, who led the North, believed in keeping the country together and ending slavery. The Civil War begins. The Civil War was one of the darkest times in American history. It lasted from 1861 to 1865 and caused immense suffering. Soldiers fought bloody battles, families were torn apart, and entire towns were destroyed. But the war also brought hope for change. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were free. This was a turning point in the war, but true freedom wouldn't come until after the war ended in 1865. The North wins the Civil War. In 1865, the North won the Civil War, and the Southern states rejoined the United States. Slavery was officially abolished with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This was a huge step forward for the nation, but the journey toward equality was far from over. Challenges after slavery. The struggles of African Americans. Formerly enslaved people, now called African Americans, faced many challenges. They were free on paper but still dealt with racism, poverty, and unfair laws. This period of rebuilding the country after the war was called Reconstruction, and it was a difficult time for everyone. With slavery abolished, millions of African Americans were finally free. But freedom wasn't easy. Many stayed in the South, working on farms for very little pay. Others moved to cities in the North, hoping for better opportunities. During Reconstruction, the U.S. government passed new laws to help African Americans. The 14th Amendment gave them citizenship, and the 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. For a short time, African Americans even held political positions and started schools. However, there was strong backlash. Many white Southerners didn't want African Americans to have equal rights. They created unfair laws called Jim Crow laws to keep black people separate and unequal. This period was full of struggles, but it also marked the beginning of a long fight for civil rights. The Industrial Revolution. During the late 1800s, America experienced a massive transformation. This period is called the Industrial Revolution. What was the Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution was a time when machines and factories changed the way people worked and lived. Instead of farming, many people began working in cities, building railroads, making steel, and creating new inventions. One of the greatest advancements was electricity. Thanks to inventors like Thomas Edison, electricity became widely available, lighting homes and powering machines. Another major invention was the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, making communication faster and easier. Railroads and economic expansion. Railroads connected the country, making it possible to travel and trade across long distances. These inventions created new industries and jobs, but they also brought challenges. Factory workers often worked long hours in dangerous conditions for little pay. Many of these workers were immigrants who came to America hoping for a better life. Immigration in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, millions of people from Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world immigrated to America. They came through places like Ellis Island in New York, where they were checked for health and allowed to enter the country. These immigrants built railroads, worked in factories, and contributed to America's growth. But they also faced discrimination and poverty. The American Dream and Expansion. Despite the challenges, immigrants and many Americans held onto the idea of the American dream, the belief that anyone could succeed in America with hard work and determination. This idea of opportunity helped America continue to grow. The government encouraged people to move west by giving them free land through the Homestead Act. Settlers built farms, towns, and railroads, turning the West into a thriving part of the country. However, this expansion came at a great cost. Native American tribes lost their land and were often forced to live on reservations. The famous Battle of Little Big Horn, where Native American leaders like Sitting Bull resisted U.S. forces, showed how deeply they fought to protect their way of life. America's growth in the early 1900s. By the early 1900s, America had grown into one of the largest and richest countries in the world. Its factories produced goods that were sold across the globe, and its military had become stronger. The Spanish-American War, 1898. One important moment in America's rise to power was the Spanish-American War. This war began when America supported Cuba's fight for independence from Spain. After winning the war, America gained control of territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This marked the beginning of America's influence around the world. Workers' struggles and unions. While America was growing richer, many workers were struggling. Factory jobs were hard and unsafe, and children were often forced to work instead of going to school. To fight for better conditions, workers began forming unions. These unions demanded fair wages, shorter work hours, and safer workplaces. Leaders like Eugene V. Debs became champions for workers' rights. One of the most famous events during this time was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911, where many workers, mostly women, died because of unsafe working conditions. This tragedy led to stronger workplace safety laws. The struggle for African American equality. As America grew, African Americans continued to fight for equality. Leaders like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois had different ideas about how to achieve progress. Washington believed in education and hard work, while Du Bois believed in demanding immediate rights and equality. Their efforts laid the foundation for the Civil Rights Movement, which would come decades later. World War I and America's growing power. In 1914, World War I began in Europe. At first, America stayed out of the war, but in 1917, it joined the fight to help its allies like Britain and France. America's involvement in the war showed its growing power on the global stage. After the war ended in 1918, President Woodrow Wilson helped create the League of Nations, an early attempt to bring countries together to prevent future wars. The Roaring Twenties. By the 1920s, America was booming. This period, known as the Roaring Twenties, was a time of excitement, new music like jazz and progress. During this time, women gained the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. Cities grew rapidly, and new cultural movements flourished, setting the stage for the country's next chapter. Challenges for African Americans and the Great Migration. But not everything was perfect. Many African Americans moved north during the Great Migration, hoping for better opportunities in cities like Chicago and New York. However, they still faced racism and segregation in the North, even though they hoped to escape the harsh conditions in the South. Despite their best efforts, inequality continued to affect their lives, and the fight for civil rights persisted. The Great Depression, America's toughest time. The 1920s were a time of fun and excitement in America, but by the late 1920s, things began to fall apart. The Great Depression began with the stock market crash in 1929, which caused widespread financial collapse. What caused the Great Depression? The stock market crash was the immediate cause, but it led to a chain of economic problems. Many people lost their money and businesses went bankrupt. Unemployment soared as millions lost their jobs. Families struggled to buy food and pay rent, while bank failures occurred because banks ran out of money and people lost their savings. This time was called the Great Depression because it was the worst economic crisis in American history. People stood in long lines for free food known as bread lines, and many became homeless. How did America survive the Great Depression? In 1933, a new president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, took office. He created a series of programs known as the New Deal to help people and rebuild the economy. These programs focused on job programs. The government hired people to build roads, schools, and bridges. Social Security. FDR started Social Security, which provided money to older people who couldn't work anymore. Bank and farm recovery. New laws helped banks and farmers recover from the economic collapse. FDR gave hope to Americans through his Fireside Chats radio talks, where he explained his plans in simple language, making them feel involved and supported during the crisis. World War II, America joins the fight in the 1930s. While America was recovering from the Great Depression, trouble was brewing in Europe and Asia. Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, was trying to take over Europe, and Japan was invading other countries in Asia. Why did America join World War II? At first, America stayed out of World War II, which began in 1939. But on December 7, 1941, Japan attacked a U.S. naval base in Hawaii called Pearl Harbor. This attack shocked the nation, and the next day, America declared war on Japan, Germany, and their allies. The home front Americans supporting the war effort. On the home front, Americans worked together to support the war. Factories switched from making cars to making weapons. Women like Rosie the Riveter worked in jobs that men had left to join the army. D-Day and victory in Europe. In 1944, American and Allied forces landed in Normandy, France, on D-Day to push back German forces. This was a turning point in the war, and by 1945, Germany surrendered. Later that year, the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, ending the war in the Pacific. America after World War II. The rise of a superpower. World War II made America one of the most powerful countries in the world. Its economy was strong and its military was unmatched. After the war, the world was divided into two main powers. 1. The United States, which believed in democracy and capitalism. 2. The Soviet Union USSR, which believed in communism. This rivalry became known as the Cold War because it wasn't fought with weapons, but with ideas, technology, and influence. The space race. The US and USSR competed fiercely to explore space during the Cold War. In 1969, the U.S. became the first country to successfully land astronauts on the Moon, marking a historic achievement in the space race. This monumental event symbolized the technological and political rivalry between the two superpowers. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. In 1962, the world came dangerously close to nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The USSR placed missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. After tense negotiations between President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, the crisis was resolved peacefully, but it marked one of the most critical moments of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall. Another iconic symbol of the Cold War was the Berlin Wall. The USSR built the wall to divide Berlin, Germany, into two parts: the East, which was under communist control, and the West, which was democratic. The wall became a stark reminder of the deep political divisions of the time. For many years, it represented the ideological conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States. Racism and inequality in America. While America was growing stronger, it still faced deep problems, particularly racism and inequality. African Americans, inspired by leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., fought for their rights during the 1950s and 1960s. Key moments in the Civil Rights Movement. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. This landmark Supreme Court decision ended segregation in public schools, ruling that separate but equal was unconstitutional. Montgomery bus boycott, 1955. After Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus, African Americans in Montgomery, Alabama, organized a boycott of the bus system, challenging segregation in public transportation. March on Washington, 1963. Over 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech calling for racial equality and justice. Important laws for civil rights. The Civil Rights Movement led to crucial laws that helped dismantle institutional racism. Civil Rights Act of 1964. This law banned discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in public places, employment, and education. Voting Rights Act of 1965. This law protected voting rights for African Americans and ensured that they could participate in elections without facing discriminatory practices like literacy tests. America's global leadership and challenges. By the 1970s and 1980s, America had established itself as a global leader in science, technology, and culture. However, the country continued to face challenges such as the Vietnam War and economic struggles. Despite these difficulties, America achieved tremendous progress in several areas. Why is America so powerful today? Several factors contribute to America's global power and influence. 1. Diverse population immigrants from all over the world bring talent, culture, and innovation to the United States, contributing to its economic and cultural strength. 2. Strong economy. America has the largest economy in the world. Major companies like Apple, Google, and Tesla are global leaders in technology and innovation. 3. Military power. America's military is not only large but also highly advanced, with military bases and alliances around the world, ensuring its dominance in global defense. 4. Cultural influence. American culture is globally influential, with Hollywood movies, music, and fashion being enjoyed worldwide. Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Michael Jackson, Beyoncé, and Taylor Swift are just a few examples of American icons who have impacted cultures around the world. 5. Global diplomacy. The U.S. works with other countries to address global issues like climate change, security, and trade, positioning itself as a diplomatic leader. 6. Food. American fast food, like hamburgers, pizza, and fried chicken, has become popular in nearly every country, showcasing America's cultural influence in global cuisine. America's strength. Diversity. One of America's greatest strengths is its diversity. People from all over the world live in America, bringing their languages, foods, traditions, and ideas. This makes America a beautiful mix of cultures. Diversity is celebrated in various festivals such as Thanksgiving, 4th of July, and multicultural events where people come together to share their traditions. The American Dream, a land of opportunity. America is often called the land of opportunity because people believe they can achieve anything here with hard work. This belief is called the American Dream. Many immigrants come to America seeking a better life. They work hard and contribute to the country's success. Inspiring stories of immigrants achieving success motivate and inspire the world. Challenges America faces. Even though America is powerful, it still faces challenges just like any country. These challenges include racism. While progress has been made, racism still exists in some places. The fight for equality continues, and the work of leaders in the civil rights movement lives on. Income inequality. Some people are very rich, while others struggle to make ends meet. Economic disparity is an issue that has been widely debated and addressed over the years. Healthcare. Healthcare in America is expensive, and many people worry about how to pay for doctor visits, hospital bills, and prescription medicines. Efforts are being made to reform healthcare systems and make it more accessible. Environmental issues. America is working hard to reduce pollution and to use clean energy sources like solar and wind power. However, this is a big challenge that requires continuous effort. Political tension. Sometimes Americans disagree about how to solve problems. This can create tension between different political groups. Even though this can be difficult, America's political system allows for debate and progress. America's role in global issues. America plays a big role in addressing global issues. For example, innovation American scientists and engineers work on solutions for climate change diseases and space exploration. The country is at the forefront of developing new technologies that can benefit the world. Helping others, the U.S. sends aid to countries facing disasters or conflicts, offering support in times of need. The future of America. Young leaders and innovation. America's future is full of possibilities, especially with the new generation of young leaders. Young Americans are passionate about making the world a better place. They work on issues like equality, technology, the environment, from artificial intelligence to space exploration. America leads the way in creating the future through innovation. These young leaders are committed to addressing global challenges and finding solutions for a better world. Unity in diversity, a stronger America. As America continues to celebrate its diversity, it will grow even stronger. Unity in diversity is the key to a prosperous future, and America's strength lies in embracing different cultures, perspectives, and ideas. Why is America so inspiring? Freedom is one of the core values that make America so inspiring. People admire the freedoms Americans enjoy, such as the freedom to speak openly, the freedom to worship in their own way, the freedom to dream big and chase after their goals. These freedoms are what many around the world look up to when they think of America and what makes the country a symbol of hope and possibility, resilience and innovation. Despite facing many challenges, America always finds a way to overcome them. Innovation is at the heart of the country's success. America's ability to create and innovate continues to inspire the world. While America is not perfect, it is a country built on hope, dreams, and hard work. Struggles lead to growth. America's history shows that struggles can lead to growth, and that diversity makes a nation stronger. America has grown from the first explorers landing on its shores to becoming one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world. America's journey from the past to the present. From the discovery of the land by explorers to the modern era, America's story is one of resilience, courage, and dreams. As we've seen, America has gone through many changes, from colonial struggles to war for independence, and eventually becoming a global superpower. But the journey doesn't stop here. The future of America. America's future is still being written by its people. People who continue to dream, innovate, and fight for a better tomorrow. Today, America is looked to for leadership, creativity, and hope. Young people today are focused on making things better, fighting for equality, protecting the environment, and creating new technologies to help tackle the world's most pressing issues. As new challenges arise, America will face them with the same strength and determination that has always shaped the country. America, the land of possibilities. America is a place where dreams can come true, no matter where you come from. The history shows us that with hard work, hope, and courage, anything is possible. The future of America is bright, full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to make it even better. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through America's history. If you enjoyed this story and want to learn more about inspiring stories, history, and personal growth, be sure to subscribe to PowerHab English. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update. At PowerHab English, we are here to help you learn, grow, and stay motivated every step of the way. Join our community and start your journey to mastering English and more. Subscribe now, and keep exploring with us.